And today I'm going to talk about the lunar eclipse on November 8th, 2022. And as usual, I'm just going to open up a chart. And as we go, this is the pretty much the first time I'm looking at this chart, and let's see what's in there. So right from the get-go, I can see that for every hard aspect, there is something to lean on. There is a harmonious aspect to lean on. So this is something I love seeing. Um, the ruler of the eclipse is Saturn. It's direct already at the time of the eclipse. It squares the eclipse. So I'm expecting, since lunar eclipses are culminations of something, I'm expecting legislation, I'm expecting regulation, I'm expecting the culmination of new rules um, since the last 6 months, since the basically since the new moon in Taurus. So think just as we do with full and new moon, think first of all 6 months back to where you were, what you started, and what are the things that direct Saturn is helping you with finishing up, but note that it squares that full moon. So the square is tension. They might be a sense of this is the final bureaucracy that you need to tackle in your Taurus, especially in your Taurus house where Rahu is. That's on a more personal level. That final bureaucracy to fix so that you can get on with your Taurus. Um, First of all, thank you, AstroSeek, for this chart. With your Taurus endeavor. So, whatever you've been doing since probably around April, yeah, 6 months back, whatever you've been doing 6 months back, it's time to see what do you need to sort out in terms of rules and regulations and institutions. And because Saturn is in Aquarius, it has to do with something that is not the bureaucracy of Capricorn so much, but rather the bureaucracy of how do you present your message to the masses. How do you deal with arguments of people who have been through this? So I can give you one concrete example. There was an alternative community that was trying to open a new bank for the people, and then they wanted to have a healing house. And I asked them, how are you going to deal with the people who don't have money? How are you going to keep avoiding a situation where the person who has the money is the person who has the power, which is what we're trying to resolve with an alternative community? Like, not really saying anything concrete. So for me, it was something that was a turnoff. So those Saturn characters are of Aquarian style. That it's not the Saturn that tries to load you up with bureaucracy for what seems to be no reason. It's a Saturn that asks a legitimate question. How are you going to realize your revolution in a way that actually achieves the point of what you came to revolutionize in your life? And you're going to have to answer Saturn. You're going to have to appease Saturn for that culmination to come into fruition. It's something that's going to happen. Okay, with the hard aspects, these are manifesting aspects, and these are the aspects that bring us things, concrete events. It's not a question. You're going to have to satisfy this Saturn thing, but also you're going to do that. Note, Uranus, Rahu, and the Moon are conjuncting. Okay, and I know the Rahu is a bit far But still, this is where Rahu is. So what you're bringing, the new that you're bringing in your Taurus house into your lives now is real. It's going to happen. It's going to manifest. And the questions, the concerns that Saturn brings about are not to fail you, but to ensure your success, to ensure to achieve what you wanted to achieve. And with Taurus, it has to do with finances, it has to do with gender inclusiveness. Because of Uranus, I say gender inclusiveness, that means not just binary gender. Okay, maybe your science or your worldview or your cosmology is going to have to adapt to more than two genders. So a lot of adaptations also of the legislation to do with communities that are based on self-sustainability. Taurus is self-sustainability. Okay, but where is Venus? Venus is in the other side. Venus is in Scorpio, and yeah, Venus is in Scorpio. She's still very close to the Sun. She's very close to Mercury and very close to the South Node. So, what we are letting go of, if we haven't by the eclipse of the 25th, that was before that, it's about to be in 2 days. If we haven't let go of those things related to Venus and Mercury in Scorpio, to those types of strategies and communication styles, to those types of um, survivalistic methods to deal with the feminine, with finances, with our value, and with our land. If we haven't let go of that, so this eclipse is definitely going to culminate that sense of letting go of what no longer serves us. But we'll still have to appease Saturn. So Saturn here could be the cause that we're letting go of an old strategy that we had. Also, because Venus is in Scorpio, it is very interesting, both for the eclipses coming in 2 days, but also for this one, for the lunar eclipse. What is it of Venus and Saturn that is still invisible? She's going to be visible in Sagittarius tropical in December too. What is it with the way we do Venus? What diplomacy we need to give up? What diplomacy we did for survivalistic reasons that we need to let go of? Because there's a diplomacy we do from a position of power. We're strong enough, we're abundant enough to share abundance. And then there is diplomacy we do when we are from a survivalistic stage. So perhaps some all diplomatic, maybe peace agreements on a mundane level that certain countries did from a survivalistic place will be let go of, will be something that we have to give up on. Okay, because sometimes being in conflict is actually contributing. And again, we're going to have Mars retrograding at the end of the month. Okay, Mars is already retrograde by this eclipse. Yes, so we're going to have Mars already retrograde because it's November. And Mars retrograde is rethinking everything Martian, rethinking conflict, rethinking war, rethinking information wars, rethinking, and it will be here in the eclipse, it will be trining Saturn. Okay, it will, because it's retrograde, it will be applying to trine Saturn. And so our actions, our sharp words, Mars in Gemini, our arguments, our debate is going to become more reflective. Perhaps we're going to fight for new rules or rethink the way that we have been advancing. Maybe something that was good back then is no longer valid for now. Maybe scientific arguments, Saturn, Mars, Mars, Gemini, arguments, Saturn, science, scientific arguments that were valid for then are not valid for now. What is the new? Where did Saturn leave? It left. We are in the context of Mars conjuncting Uranus earlier this year, and then moving forward. So we have a booming new technology, booming new insights, booming, yeah, the good and the bad, and then we have Saturn in reflection back, trining Saturn. What new rules do we need to fight for to implement those technologies that we were beginning to build up in the Saturn, in the Mars Uranus conjunction with the North Node? Okay, this is the beginning of a new phase. Remember, Venus Cazimi was in Libra for the first time in over a century. Um, so there are big new changes. Remember the Pluto, Saturn, Jupiter conjunction in Capricorn, tropical. Another big cycle. And into those big cycles, we have little cycles. So Pluto is already direct. Okay. Uranus is still retrograde. So Uranus retrograde, Mars retrograde, Neptune is still retrograding and trining our Ketu and Venus, Mercury, and the Venus, Mercury, and the Sun. Jupiter is still retrograde, but now in Pisces. So we're going back to around April, is the, and we're going back to around when was the conjunction? I think June, July, August, or something like that. Yeah. Um, we're going back in smaller cycles and redoing things, redoing our arguments, redoing our framework and frameworks, establishing a new or a relevant infrastructure for our new technologies, for our new ideas. Okay, people talking, for example, about zero emission jet planes. Okay, and we had a Jupiter Mars conjunction. Remember, Mars had conjuncted all that we see. We see Mars had conjuncted Pluto, Saturn, Neptune, um, Jupiter, Chiron, and Uranus in the North Node. Okay, Mars is informed by that, and Mars is also the initiation, sharp tools, war tools in Gemini, technology, war technology, but not necessarily. Also, a technology that does something new, because Mars is also ruling Aries. Okay, and for new technologies, we need to think structurally. How do we deliver the message to the masses? Is another point, another interesting thing. We can have a reform, let's say reform in public transportation, very much Taurus, because Venus is also ruling cars. So reform in public transportation, and then the people don't understand the reform, so they're like, oh, we lose money here, we lose money there, they can't critique it correctly. Think about those things, okay, coming from bottom up with Saturn, but still top down with Pluto. So for every opposition, we have a trine or a sextile, and for every square opposition, we have a trine or a sextile. This is a very blessed condition. It doesn't mean that it's an easy condition, but it is a blessed condition for situations where we want to lean on something. It's not going to be all terrible, okay? Jupiter is going to be in Pisces, so your Pisces house is rethinking something happy that happened. So perhaps when Jupiter was direct in Pisces, you were too optimistic about something, and then it left Pisces, you were disillusioned. But now you're kind of like, well, there are still things I can take from that optimistic point of view or those optimistic experience. There's still something to go back to and integrate and assimilate into my worldview, into my day-to-day experience, wherever Pisces and Aries is in your house. There is still something to take from this that I can use. I don't have to throw the baby with the cradle. And so Jupiter in Pisces making it easier for us. Okay, it's trine in Venus, it's trine in Mercury, it's trine in the Sun, it's trine in Ketu, so it's an easier way of letting go. There's things that we need to let go that it's difficult for us to let go, but Jupiter makes it optimistic, makes it easier to let go of these things. It reminded us that we're letting go for the sake of expanding, and letting go is a part of the process of expanding. Thinking about moving to a new house, okay? You have to you are living, let's say, in your student apartment or in your a small apartment, and now you're expanding, you're growing, and you're moving into a new house. But you're also letting go of a place you've come accustomed to, of people you've come accustomed to. Okay, maybe you grew, a couple of plants and something, and you need to take them with you, but you cannot take all of them with you. You need to let go. Jupiter is there to remind you that the reason that you're letting go is because you're expanding your consciousness. And the new is already here because it is in opposition. The moon, what does the moon do in magic, right? It is the closest to Earth. It's bringing in a revolution. It's a culmination of a sense of revolution, new, change. So also this can be disruptive times in terms of a lot of new changes, new revolutions, new finances coming into your life. It could actually be a growth of a business, and now you have to let go of an old structure that you were working with. Maybe you need to let go of your own bank because now you have other means of running your money. The new is here. But now it's time to let go. It will no longer be the old, banker that you used to call and arrange everything with. Now it's going to be maybe a digitized system, new technology of finances. But Jupiter is there reminding you that you're doing it because you're expanding, because you're making more money, because you've grown. So you're no longer in survival, Ketu and Scorpio, with all the communication styles of survival, the diplomacy you did when you had to survive, um, and the way you were shining in crisis, letting go of that, inviting in the new. Now you're thriving. Now there's a big sudden change, big sudden growth. And that growth allows you to let go of a lot of survival mechanisms that you must let go of. Must. Scorpio must let go of. Keto and Scorpio absolutely let go of. And Saturn here is mitigating or making sure that as you give up your survival coping mechanisms, you're instilling a new framework that you can actually sustain. So Saturn here is helping to sustain. Maybe you are very excited for the new. You're so excited to be in a thriving mindset. There is enough mindset. Maybe you've been trying to cultivate abundance mindsets, and you see the change in technology, or see the change in the abundance mindset, but then you were exposed to I don't know, people who cannot pay for public transportation if they don't have this and that iPhone, or for people who don't have access to these technologies. And Saturn is there making times where reform or the past 2 years of Uranus Saturn conjunction, square. All these things that the new that was trying to come, and Saturn was saying, hey, what is with the elderly people? What about the homeless people? What about the people who can't afford? What about black people? What about people of colors? What about that? What about the traditional people? What about the people who don't speak the new language? How are you going to take care of all these people in the new system? How are you making sure that by bringing in the new, you're not actually going backwards instead of going forward? This is the job of Saturn in Aquarius. And still, Saturn in Aquarius is still social distancing, but also, what about the rise? We talk about communities. Communities, this community. What about people who like to be in their own, space and grow their own, food, and they want to meet with the community every once in a while, whenever they feel like they want to communicate with another person? What about these people? Saturn in Aquarius is actually making sure what happened during the COVID lockdowns. What did we remember? What about bringing food to the elderly? And so now elderly rights are brought to the forefront. What about those old people? Suddenly people are bringing food. Suddenly people remembered to call the elderly people, to bring food to the elderly people. What about people whose immune system is compromised? Okay, when we take off our masks, those people still need accommodation. Those people still need consideration. It's not just, put a mask on, put a mask off. Their immune system exposes them to difficulties also when there is no COVID. So what have we done for these people? Saturn direct is calling us to make the corrections that we need in terms of the way we run society. This is not the Pluto Capricorn. It can be legislation or the bureaucracy relative to the marginalized society, because Saturn still rules Aquarius and still rules Capricorn as well. But it is more likely to be a bottom-up process of how do those communities arrange themselves to care for the marginalized groups of these alternative communities. Alternative banking system, alternative, I don't know, gender equity based structures and businesses, um, alternative agriculture. So, on a mundane level, there is good news, also to do with technology. But then there are questions. I can even think about, the mission to Mars. So, the mission to Mars, okay, my concern was that Elon Musk was planning to put slaves on Mars to pay their debt. But if he corrected that, if he corrected this, the way that he intends to do that, if he took into account those marginalized societies or those people in debt and made their life actually easier and not make them slaves, then I would completely change my mind about my support in Musk's program, and many other people would as well. Okay, so this is a very good time to make the changes and the corrections needed. Because when Pluto is going to go to Aquarius, especially when it goes, and I'm thankful for S.J. Anderson, who did the For Good post about when the outer planets enter a new sign for good. So the For Good is going to be on March 2023, if I'm not mistaken, or am I? I think it's going to be March. No, or March is Saturn. I don't know. So when Pluto enters Aquarius for good, whatever we didn't correct with the Saturn phase is going to create a crisis. And now it's going to be expensive for the people who didn't correct their mistakes to not correct the mistakes. Okay. And what do I mean by expensive? Um, when you Aquarius is about marginalized societies and their power. So if you didn't take into consideration so and so groups in society, they may revolt. But they may revolt in a way that undermines the power of those heads or leaders of those communities. And it may, and the first time it happens, people will need time to readjust, just like 2008 versus 2022. The first time this crisis happens, people need to readjust. And they will have 20 years, they'll have 2 decades to readjust, but that will already be readjusting following a certain crisis. It's what they didn't see. But with Pluto there, it's not what they didn't see coming, but what they prefer to ignore. Unless it is in your 12th house, like me, so it's probably things that you still did not see coming. Um, and we have still Mars is still in the range of squaring Neptune, being both retrograde. So it still tells us that at least at the time of the eclipse, action-oriented approaches can go. I wanted to say can go bankrupt, but they can go into situation where the action is misinterpreted or the reality is not seen properly. Um, uh, or it's difficult to exert the energy outside, so there can be a buildup of frustration. Because it's Neptune, I don't see a lot of buildup here because Neptune dissolves things. So the good news is there might not be such a build-up to explosion that we would experience, let's say, if it was Pluto. Um, the perhaps difficulty is that Mars might need direct action that Neptune dissolves. So if you're acting in favor of reflecting upon the way you've been doing the media frame wars and you're trying to reframe yourself better, it might still, you might not reflect on the right things with this aspect. But Saturn is supportive. Okay? So it can be a couple of things. You might reflect on the wrong things and get success in delivering your arguments, but these are the wrong things. Or you might reflect on the wrong things, but Saturn is going to make sure that you're arguing for the right things, or even if you didn't express yourself correctly, if you didn't act right, Saturn is going to regulate what actually needs to be regulated here. So that is the fortunate, that can be the fortunate uh, implication of this aspect. And of course, the moon squares Saturn. So emotionally, it's probably, prepare for at least a couple of days that bring in your rose quartz, bring in your moonstone, bring in your self-care practices, because you're going to be feeling revolutionary depressed at the same time, you know? Or depressed about revolution, or Saturn is contraction, anxiety, depression, reality check, and then the moon is very close to Uranus, and Uranus wants to explode with joy and bring in the new and rebel and whatnot, or it will explode with anger, um, and and the moon is closer conjuncting Uranus, so which is a very uh, difficult. It can be overwhelming to a point where a person just might get a bit dissociated or numb their feelings, so that they don't have to, if they don't know what to do with this energy, and then comes Saturn. squares that. So the process in itself is not going to feel easy, but you will be able to see the bigger picture with Jupiter in Pisces trining Mercury. That is how we think. So you will be able to see the bigger picture and reflect on the bigger picture and understand how important it is to let go. And even though it is difficult, you need to do it. Okay? Um, so this is also when we cut our losses, what we lost. There's a culmination, but the other side of that culmination is what we're letting go of, what we lost, what didn't work, what what certain types of diplomacies we need to abandon. And those diplomacies have something to do with weapons, because Ketu is ruled by Mars. Mars is Gemini technology, so weapon technology, war, the way we use war, the way we achieve peace with weapon, the way we fight for war, the way the peace agreements we made in order to obtain weapon. All of those survivalistic mechanisms that on a mundane level, at least partially, we need to let go of, um, can be brought into a certain point that we understand that that is no longer going to be available for the, either we let go of that or it's no longer going to be available for us. I can think about Starlink, and Elon Musk said he will be donating money to Ukraine or for weapon to weaponize them, even though Starlink is not making money. It's not making enough money. It's not profitable. So the money for weapon might run out. Venus, okay, ruling Taurus, the wealth for weapon might run out. The money to fund these certain technologies might run out. Okay, the funding for certain type of peace agreements might run out. Think about, I can, well, I don't expect that to be so immediate, but Israel recently made an agreement with Lebanon where she gave up a part of the water territory and the land underneath for Lebanon so that there will be gas. The gas that was found will be used, and then we also share profits with Lebanon. All in all, it seems very fair. Only one thing we didn't take into consideration is we're heading towards renewed energies world. We're heading towards a world where every smart country is relying on solar or hydrogen or water or biomass, and as less as possible on gas, even if only for utilitarian political reasons. And so this big news might not have the effect that we desire it to be. The peace in the Middle East, the fact that we desire them to be. I don't expect that to be that immediate, but definitely we see, Europe is going to have to do something about relying on gas in general, not on gas from Russia, on non-sustainable energy. Germany is doing a lot with, biomass for powering buildings. Netherlands has Lightyear One that has already created fully solar cars that work in the Netherlands with the exposure of sun that you have in Venus. Okay, so imagine more sunny countries. And how is that going to change global economy? Because the Taurus Scorpio axis is absolutely energy. It doesn't tell us the type of energy just yet, but it's absolutely about energy. And what are we letting go of in our thinking of energy, and how that changes the borders between state. We're getting to more, privatized jet planes, And now we have to think of air boundaries, air borders, all of those things. We had Iran giving drones or planes without a pilot. I don't know how to call it in English. The planes without a pilot. It was not drones because it was called that. Planes without a pilot to Russia to use in the war with Ukraine. Okay, so then use war technologies, and then what? How will it affect the international relation to Iran, which all in all is not in a good state? Um, because of something Venusian, because of something to do with women as well. So its international reputation went even lower than it was, and albeit it's many times that it tried to make its relations better. So for Iran, for example, this is a very interesting time because it made a lot of diplomacy using weapon to sort of find friends. um, and so, before 1979, its natural friends were Israel, and now they're in conflict with Israel, which makes it very difficult for them because it's not like they're shining in the Middle East. They're a minority, they're a marginalized society in the Middle East when you think about it. Then there is a problem to make friends with the West. So they're not friends with the East and they're not friends with the West. And a lot of the survivalistic methods for them to make peace might not be available or might not be effective, or they might run out of the ability to fund these agreements. Same for Israel. If Israel has been making money, it's been making a peace agreement based on natural energy. What happens when that natural energy is no longer valid? And then what? What, we're going to go to war with Lebanon because the money ran out? It's not a bad thing that you do a peace agreement, but those peace agreements that were for survivalistic reasons might not apply anymore on a mundane level. And they're to do with energy. Okay? And electricity is more Uranus related. Electric current is more related to the nervous system. It's more Uranus related. And so this is the new. What about, you hear about cities that the cars are either cities that do not allow any cars becoming a trend, or cities that the cars are only electric. And then what happens with the people who do not have money, let's say, to purchase an electric car? What will be of these people? Um, but then, if something is done for survivalistic reasons, you will need to let go of it. You will need to think thriving. It's a big jump, but in this thriving mindset, you would still need to ensure that you appease marginalized society. Because if not, if you didn't listen to Saturn, there comes Pluto. How does your new ideology, your new technology, your new method accommodate for marginalized society? People who are not women, people who are non-binary, even men, okay, even men that are can be marginalized society in certain conditions. What about the men that didn't adapt? They're not violent, but they would be considered sexist today, not because they ever hurt a woman, but because they're looking for the old woman that does no longer exist. Okay, what are we going to do? Are they going to starve? I'm not talking about just love and relationships. I'm talking about practically what are they going to do? Um, are we taking care of the old, of the people that are left out? Because we are going to be outdated when we grow old as well. What are we going to do with the people that are outdated? That are not criminals, but just outdated. Okay, to people who don't have technologies and can, own a cell phone and, buy a house in crypto. The people that are outdated, how can they still manage a good life and have access to social services. What about the people who don't speak English? Okay, I'm Israeli. I've been speaking English since age, I don't remember whenever my mama let me study. She held it for so long. Um, she didn't want me to get bored in school. So the minute I could study something, I didn't stop studying. But what about the people who don't speak well English and don't have money to pay for a private teacher and don't have, orientation savvy and all of that? Because it's also Mercury. Mercury is also the languages that we speak. What if it's not going to be English? What if it's going to be, Russian or Chinese or whatever a new language that we might all need to study to the international relations? Who knows? Um, and so those things that we did for survival are no longer, are just no longer. Of course, with Saturn involved, yes, there can be death. But death, because every cycle we are losing people. Some people die of old age, okay? The type of people that may die of old age can either be, the people that have their sun, moon, ascendant in hard aspects with Saturn plus other things, plus it is their time. Um, but it also can be, let's say, people whose strategies, whose ways of thinking, whose even genders kind of belong to where Ketu is. Maybe also Rahu. And so it can be a situation where we're bringing in the new, but we're letting go of something that was old and dear to us. Um, and Saturn is actually there to ensure that we're not going to get rid of the people that we don't need to get rid of. It is at home, it is strong. It is asking for us to take care of those marginalized society, to take care of those left behind when we are bringing in the new. Um, and so perhaps making it harder to let go, um, because we don't want to let go of those that we don't have to let go of. Okay, there may be people who will take time to learn the new normal, the new truth, not the new normal in terms of COVID, the new um, timeline that is brought in terms of technology, banking, finances, gender. Maybe, a lot of people with many professions, healing professions, will need to learn a whole new language regarding to gender. And they just need to have training because it's a whole new language that they need to learn. Or they will need to marginalize their crowd to people who speak the previous languages. Okay? With Scorpio, it can be also psychologists. It can be also people who um, deal with even shamanic journeying, all those things that their language needs to accommodate for the new. And they need to become more technology savvy to keep doing what they have been doing. So some of them are going to need training, and some of them might pass away. But then it's not passing away that necessarily is difficult. It can be passing away of old age. It can be ailment that is. It doesn't necessarily mean painful. It's just mean that we might be saying goodbye to Scorpio-related people this in this coming month. Um, mm, 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 mm. Yeah, and Pluto there. So Pluto is sextiling Jupiter, and Jupiter is basically applying to sextile Pluto. Um, that's an interesting aspect when I think about it. It's an interesting aspect. It's not a manifesting aspect. It is an aspect that is available for us to tap into and to use. But it can be that we're reflecting upon our worldview in regarding to structures and systems and authority figures and plutocrats, literally plutocrats. And we may be doing that in an optimistic way. We might see the positive role of plutocrats and what positive role plutocrats played. I was having a talk with lawyer about the French Revolution and how between the French Revolution and democracy, we had the use of the guillotine plenty of times. If I'm not mistaken, this was also the time that Pluto was discovered. Um, and the guillotine is a humane way to get rid of those people that were in key positions that were a threat to democracy, to the building of democracy. It was the first time of building a democratic regime that is less totalitarian, that is less concentrated, that is a bit less hierarchical, a lot less than, kingship or dictatorship or whatnot. And so Pluto was actually of good use to make sure that those old people will not disturb the new, because if they would be kept alive, they could try to endanger the building of democracy. And it did take 300 years to establish a democratic regime in France. It was not the fact that it was a French Revolution. It doesn't mean that it was 30 days. It was 300 years. Um, and guillotine was used a lot because it was a humane way to make sure that those ways of the old are being taken care of, okay, that they're being put away, that the problem is solved, that they won't bother us. It was not wanting to hurt anybody, but rather wanting to make sure that they will not be hurting us. And so we don't have to scare them, we don't have to jail them, we just get rid of them. It's another, very, very scorpionic in the sense of you just get rid of it. For once, make sure that that won't bother us anymore. And there is only one way to do that. They are no longer with us. Um, and so when you think about the types of revolutions that Uranus brings, finances, gender inclusivity, marginalized societies, accessibility for land, it's not enough. Let's take a cliche topic, sexual harassment or violence against women. Okay, it's not enough to have rules that support women. It is also important for the judges and the lawyers and the police and the rehabilitation and the psychologists, that everyone involved needs to change so that the new is instilled. And Pluto making its journey through the final degrees of Capricorn is doing this job. Because what's coming, if you think about the US Pluto return, what's coming after, let's say, making abortion completely out of hand for all women in all countries? If there were any, I don't even like the word Democrats. I think USA should have banned the use of the word Democrats for a political party, but that's me, because it's very misleading. But if any person who is, and not even liberal, because it's a liberal democracy, and that's very misleading politically to call a party, we're liberals, you're blah blah blah. No, it's not. It's not the anti-democratic party within democracy, although it can seem that way. Um, but if there are any people who were optimistic about the intention to bring conservatism or to bring the old to the new in the United States, they are awake now. And so they will need to make sure that nothing will ever again threaten the ability to terminate a pregnancy ahead of time, or alternatively raise a child even if you come from marginalized society. So it can go both ways. It can be like deciding to reverse this decision with Pluto going direct, okay? Deciding to, when Pluto will be touching that point again for the final time, one final time we allow abortions in all states and we terminate anybody that could threaten it, even to the point of using the guillotine, like in France. Alternatively, it is a new policy regarding welfare. How are you going to raise these children? And Jupiter, children, sextile in Pluto is not a manifesting aspect, but it is an aspect that creates tremendous transformation in our awareness to those children. I saw a beautiful post. um, People who give nicknames to their channel and not their names make it difficult for me to remember the nickname and the name, but she did, is a Libra astrologer, and she did an episode, two episodes with Chris Brennan on Libra and on the phases of the moon, I think, as well. So you know exactly. I have her face in front of me, and the post she posted a wonderful post on Instagram where she's shown the stage of where when until up until when it was legal to make an abortion, and what does a fetus looks like. It looks like, basically, she said a kombucha Scooby, and I was like, this is genius. For me, I was looking at the beauty of this living creature, this living organism that is about to be, but the context was, of course, this is what people talk about. And again, this Saturn at home, Saturn in his sciencey Aquarius, this is what people talk about when they talk about terminating life at so and so age of the fetus. This is a kombucha Scooby. And that is one fantastic argument. It's very transformative and very visual. A very good way of framing things regarding children. So Jupiter will be conjuncting Neptune, and that can mean that any message regarding children, Mercury message regarding children, or a message regarding abortion, the letting go of children, can go viral. But this message will already be transformative. Again, this is a potential. It does not a manifesting aspect, but this is something that people can tune into and use. And so certain arguments we will need to let go of when we have this transformative new creation, transformative new art, or to visibly see it. It's like, this is what you're talking about. You don't even see a fetus. And and that is something that can transform the mind of people. um, Other things I want to say regarding this Pluto. So worldview. So how do we view plutocracy? How do we view structures? How do we view um, the structure of the transformation of structure, cells regeneration, absolutely cells regeneration, um, and Jupiter is our worldview, so it can literally be the cells. Okay, it's getting there. It's getting there. There will definitely be actions to do regarding to the cells, or the genetic, the essence of children, of embryos, of pre-birth, and dissolution of something, and the message, the reflection that is made in this regard, that when Jupiter turns direct, we would have let go of our ideas about abortion and about the early stage of pregnancy, because this is not regarding abortion. So many people actually have natural abortions that they're not aware of. When I was learning as a holistic health practitioner about paying attention to our moon cycle, people who have wombs, who menstruate, and learning about so many cases where a person can get pregnant, but because the baby did not fully absorb the baby, for me the baby, the it's not yet a baby, but because this new life did not fully absorb and did not have enough nutrition or enough time until menstruation, then there is an actual natural abortions, and maybe many people trying to get pregnant and don't know that they had this. So sometimes not knowing can be good for the emotional and psychological well-being of the couple. Um, but sometimes it's something that you would need to know, because you could treat that and then manage to give birth if you're actually trying to give birth. So you could be on the side of pregnancy, both side of pregnancy control, okay, pre-birth control, uh, and that is definitely a topic that we're going to deal with in terms of bureaucracy, in terms of structure, um, and uh, and there can be a certain disillusionment with what we thought that is, or alternatively a new sense of wonder. For me, when I was seeing this picture of those cells, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a beautiful form of life, and it's so beautiful. But for people who need this to make sure that they are not going through the process of birth giving, and being a parent in circumstances where it's not time for them, or they're not, or they didn't choose to, it's important for other reasons. So that's on a mundane level. Also, the way we view power. Um, and so our worldview, even if our actions are not yet in alignment, they're very much regulated and controlled by Saturn. So Saturn is actually playing a good role here. And our worldview is transforming. Our worldview is transforming. Our worldview about both things to do with Pisces. Um, and Pisces can be prenatal in the sense that it is when something is not quantifiable yet. Again, it's the oceans. It's very difficult to quantify water. Can't, you know, um, and you have to put something in a glass, so you can say, okay, this, but the glass is the quantity, not the water. So we will be able to view also things like the oceans in a new way, transform a view of big bodies of water, transform a view of medicine, and perhaps be more aware of illusions and disillusionment with medicine, what is correct, what is not correct, not to throw the baby with the cradle, okay? So maybe there are some medications that we said, oh, we need to get rid of those, they make a lot of side effects, and then we say, okay, maybe they need adjustment, maybe they don't need to get rid of, but then there is access that maybe we would think some people were taking excess medicine and they would need to reduce that. And so a change of a mindset, a change of a worldview, or deepening the breathing, which is another Jupiter retrograde, okay, our breath work can be benefic to those types of more less quantifiable types of healing, let's say. Anything more I have to say about this? And again, eclipse is a culmination, lunar eclipse is a culmination point. We finish something and then we let go of the excess. So think, and it's very much about birth giving. There's a fruit to something, and then whatever excess stuff were in this process, we can dispose of that excess, and it can also be excess energy. Um, Anything more on a mundane level? We see Lilith is applying to opposite Pluto. Okay, it's not something we may feel so strongly in this eclipse, but it is a point, and it is something to take into account. Lilith in Cancer applying to opposite Pluto. Um, that's an important one. You know, the power of raw sexuality or our raw instincts and raw emotions facing power and control. Um, that's something to keep in mind. Just be conscious, be aware. Um, yeah, Venus is still invisible. So Venus is going through an update. So she's letting go of certain things to do with survivalistic mechanisms and all the themes we said, you know, finances, women or the feminine, diplomacy, um, refined arts, and so the art we made, or the healing arts, perhaps arts we made in order to heal. Now we can just make art that is different. There's the difference between the art I make when I'm depressed and the art I make when I'm painting a beautiful paint that honors my newborn flowers in the garden. Okay, so we're heading to those newborn flowers in the garden. We're letting go of some of the artwork that we had done to heal. So we're doing a major step, and a major step in honoring. Think about, you know, if the new art galleries are going to. I actually see in the city where I live, they were sending an ad calling for artists to just stroll around the city and create art inspired by the city. And think about that as an art versus a couple of months ago, where there was there was a public art gallery in the street, a very beautiful one that was created by the people and youth that survived the war, that managed to escape the war in Ukraine. So some of them were living in our cities, in their city, and they were painting their experiences following, you know, that escape or their experience of the war. So that was more the healing art, the art you make because you are trying to survive a crisis, and so you bring it into a creation. You paint your feelings, you paint your experience, and you have an emotional transformation, a psychological transformation with the use of art, versus strolling around the city that you love and seeing a beautiful garden and deciding you, or seeing the mountains and deciding you're going to dedicate a painting in honoring love of, you know, the mountains view and what you do see and what you do love. So when you say, oh, I'm going to dedicate this time to honor what I love, or write, you know, a love song to my beautiful healthy relationship, there are a lot of songs that perhaps you used to listen to, um, you know, and brought this catharsis to you. But now, also, if you're an artist making an album, it's always good to have both, because when people will no longer need healing, they will listen to the songs that you were writing when you were happy. Um, so yeah, if I come with a concrete example of an album that came out, was Homosexual by Darren Hayes. There are a list of great albums that came out in the last couple of months. And if you compare, for example, Hey Matt to Let's Try Be in Love, so you might be listening to Hey Matt less and to Let's Try Being in Love more following this eclipse. And it can be that even the artists themselves are going to listen more and more to these songs, but there is a part that has to let go of all the beautiful art that you've created while you were struggling. Okay, so if you are a creator, all those paintings that you created, that you need to let go of, that they might not make it to certain, not necessarily a tour, but maybe certain tours or certain art galleries, or museums, and that might, or maybe you were a healer, maybe you were an artist and then you needed a profession, so you learned therapy with art. And now you have to let go of that because you're creating art. So it's a sadness you will have to let go of, maybe of your patients or maybe of the colleagues or the people you are working with. But this is in favor of something that is from a thriving sense, that now you can be the artist that you were set out to be after you've helped all these people with being creative. So all in all, a very moving phase where you can create out of love, but this will happen when Venus will be visible in Sagittarius, so new concepts um, that are coming around for Venus. Um, so let's do, where are we? Where are we? How long have we been doing this? Okay, let's do sign by sign. And I'll begin with the, if you are inclined to do timestamps, you get a cookie or a reading for free, but just make sure you write me before you do that and get my approval, because otherwise you think you get the cookie, but it is already given to someone else. So, ascendant Capricorn. For ascendant Capricorn, the Pluto is in your first house. If you are, ascendant in the last decan of Capricorn, this is a major thing for you, um, because Pluto is in your house. So you've been having a transformative time, all in all, since 2008, and it's about to get easier in some sense and then more difficult when Pluto moves to Aquarius, but that is something separate. The eclipse itself is happening in your, wait, 5th and 11th. So, 5th and 11th, what you do for fun versus what you do for a sense of meaning and purpose. You're gonna have to let go of some of the things that were giving you a sense of meaning and purpose while you were struggling in favor of something that you do for fun. More leisure time for you, or more time that you dedicate to your children. So there was something you had as, all in all, having Scorpio as the 11th house, it means that your goals and life and colleagues are around themes that can have to do with survival. The 11th house can be a survivalistic place for you, even if it's well aspected. Okay, you can get a sense of meaning and purpose from this deep transformation. It's not the only significations of Scorpio, but there's usually a huge transformation, a shamanic healing, you know, turning things upside down, going to the edge. This is usually the places where you rejoice if you had, let's say the sun in Scorpio. You like the thrill of going to the edge. And there's a lot you're going to have to let go of. Or perhaps you may have a child that was struggling, and now that struggle is something that they need to let go of. So it can be your child is letting go of a certain struggle that they had. But that has a point of sadness for the habits that they used to have, or maybe old values that they used to have. And and with that sadness, with that sense of letting go of these old values, there is the embracing of the new, or alternatively embracing a certain new hobby, and having to let go of bit of going to the edges in your, in your activism, in your meaning and purpose. Or certain colleagues that maybe took you over the edge, or certain friends and acquaintances that you used to have, extreme emotions around. But that might be, either affecting your children or your relationship with your children, or it may be affecting your ability to enjoy life. Okay, and so something that was meant to be to give you joy, or maybe there are certain hobbies that you give up. Okay, so because the ruler of the 50s and the 11th, maybe certain hobbies you give up because you were starting these hobbies, you're starting these relations, or maybe with certain children for survivalistic reasons, and now that survivalistic thing is off the table. Um, so you're going to revolutionize the way you relate to them, but all in all, it's not going to feel pleasant at first, because the stage of the moon there is just very occupied. Okay, it's not a bad thing, but it's not necessarily going to feel as exciting as you would want that to feel at first. Wait, things do get better. Aquarius ascendant. For you, this happens in your fourth and 10th houses. So, what you're letting go of something of the 10th, of your career environment, father figures, your status, what you're known for to the world, a certain sort of image that you're known for, certain aspects in your image that you were known for in the right of your fourth and fifth houses. And now, but that was something that you adopted as a coping mechanism, and now you're letting go of that. You're going through, Saturn in your first house, contracting, contracting, contracting. What is no longer serving is weeding out all that is no longer serving. For you, it may be needing to say goodbye to a father figure, or to a person who is a feminine that was a boss, or that was a leader, or that was someone either in your career environment, or maybe you had a single mom or something like that. That there are some aspects, the survivalistic aspects in this relationship you will need to let go of. So it can actually be, if you're, let's say, a teenager, it can actually be that you're moving on, you move into your new house, and so, what you did, certain hobbies that you did are going to perhaps become a career, or certain hobbies that you did for career will need to be revised and changed. But you're moving into a new house, and it feels a bit strange and debilitating. And also, it changes your relationships with your parents because you're self sustainable. Taurus, you become more self sustainable. And so, your relationships with your parents and your bosses is changing, or your landlord even. Okay, you become more you grow up, you contracted what you need to contract, sometimes your muscles even, and now you're more self-sustainable, you're more technology savvy, a bit of revolutionary, and now you got what you wanted. Okay, you got, if you needed to move into a new house, you got that new house, you got that new place. And you might be needing to let go of a job, to let go of a career, to let go of women in your house that were, maybe you were working with someone, with a woman in your house, and you would need to let go of her completely. She's not coming back. Okay? Maybe you had a hobby that you turned into a job, and you were doing that with a partner that was more Venusian or diplomatic. They're not coming back. But at any case, know that what you're letting go of was something that was coping mechanism for you. This all relationship, this all partnership, it was something you did for survival. And it served you well up until a certain point, and now it's time to be more self-sustainable. And it doesn't feel so joyous at first, but it's going to be better as you go. And whatever it is, the old is not coming back. Pisces ascendant. This thing is happening in your third and ninth house. But what? The ruler of the third and the fourth in the ninth. Something is eclipsed. Okay? Maybe it's children in the home you had abroad that you will need to give. Let's say, if you're in the worst case scenario, you're going through a divorce and you need to give up, being in contact with your house, with your spouse, and for some degree with your children. The way you were communicating, the way you were connecting is not going to be the same. or alternatively, certain relationships you've had, certain home you have had in Ausland, okay, abroad, or in the academia, or a certain sense of homeness that you have, or certain teachers, or academic teachers, or certain worldview, something there that was established for the sake of survival, you will be letting go of. No longer can you rely on that. No longer can you rely on having that home abroad. No longer can you rely on maybe having a certain business abroad. Okay, so it can also be a business. Or certain ways you were communicating with people in the academia or people abroad, or certain relationships that you made for survivalistic reasons, no longer will they be a part of your life. If it's not about thriving, if it's not about genuine exchange of ideas, it's not going to be part of your life anymore. But what will be a part of your life, perhaps new form of transportation. Maybe you get it's a new it's like you're giving up something Venusian in favor of another Venusian thing. You're giving up something in sometimes it can be you give up something in order to get. I think about people who run their money through trusts. And so sometimes you have to sell to the trust and then buy from the trust. So it's like you have to, let's say, I don't know, um, sell your car and buy your and rebuy your car for bureaucratic reasons. But it's a sudden change, and there's an upgrade there. Or maybe you have to sell. Maybe you sell your car to the fund, and then you buy it and sell it, and you because now the fund is going to run your money, and you're not going to run your money individually. Or alternatively, you change, you change a bank. Maybe you close a bank account to reopen something more digital, a digital bank account. That can also be the case because it is, Taurus's finances. But you might be doing that. Maybe you have a private account and now you've been running your business through your private account, and now you need to close that and to do a private account and a business account. But it's going to be with technology, a digital bank or global system or another bank. You might be seeking to open a bank account abroad. But then you will have to let go of something. Okay? You'll have to let go of something abroad. Maybe certain studies. Maybe you were thinking, maybe you were changing the field of studies. And so you have something digitized to do with the way you run your finances or your relationships with that. And then you no longer have to deal with this. There's a problem, then you no longer have to deal with this problem. And remember, because Mercury is there, so you have the ruler of the fourth, the sun is the ruler of your sixth. So a lot of career, not necessarily career, but more a job, a service that you were given abroad, the way that you've been doing that, you will need to upgrade, you will need to digitize something. There's something new coming up, but you will have to let go of the entire direction that you were taking that at first, so that the new can come by. This can also be a sibling. So maybe a sibling have business abroad that they terminate. Maybe somebody in your home. Okay, maybe somebody's given up the idea of living abroad. But then just it's in favor of something new. Maybe when I think about it, maybe somebody is given up the idea of living abroad in a traditional way, but they're in favor of, let's say, a fancy solar van Okay, solar cars. Definitely solar cars. Remember, this is what we let go of, but we let go of it in favor of something new. Okay? Something sudden, technology that can merge those things can come. So we let it go of something all to do with how this Mercury, Sun, Venus, and then something, some technology that it's like solar cars can be the thing now. Okay, and for you, um, it's something that can be beneficial, but because this is also your ninth house and your worldview, um, you would really need to keep in mind the big picture here. Because it's not going to feel so nice. Maybe you've culminated, you've achieved something, but it doesn't feel so nice just yet. Doesn't feel so nice just yet. This will change as you let go of the conceptions or the misconceptions you had about what's going on in this Taurus house. But it's a confusing one because the rulers of the very house where the new is entering to are with what's going away. The ruler of what is coming is the thing that we need to let go of. And this is true to all ascendants. Ascendant Aries. This is happening in your second and eighth house. So if for Taurus it would be, if for Pisces it would be the finances you use for your business or the finances you use for your car, driving license or whatnot, or siblings. For you, it's the finances. It's where you keep the money that you make with your skill, whether you are employed or not. What is, how you make your money, what are your values, and what you spend your money on. New expenses, having to learn to do what you do in a digital way, maybe a digital course, maybe you're gonna have to change, if you haven't, to Zoom meetings, or charge money in a digital way, or charge Bitcoin, or charge Ethereum, or whatever other new it's gonna feel uncomfortable at first, but also exciting and desirable in the long run. And where there are places where to make your skills or to make your money or to even charge you of money, you've been using systems of the eighth. You've been, for survivalistic reasons, you may have had on funding that is from other people in a way that you will no longer, not that you won't feel that you no longer need that, but basically it's no longer going to be there because there's something new that's happening. And it could be a new skill to do with technology or science or agriculture that you may do in a way that is more technological. You become more self-sustainable. And so let's say if Venus was the people or the colleagues or the women you were commercing with, or you were maybe your accountant, now you become more self-sustainable and you're like, oh wait, there's a new program that I can do these things now. I don't need to pay for an accountant, or I don't need to invest money where I was investing money. There's a new way for me to do things. Or now let's say investments, because this is also investments, your eighth house. So your investments um, that are no longer making the yield that is desirable. So you turn to other more technological Venusian ways to make money. It can also be that you were investing or your money came out of investment if you had like ruler of the eight in the second, and now you either change the rule of investment or you decided, you know what, I really like to sing, and I see that I can, with this technology, and instead of just investing in it, I can write, I can finally record my album and have crowdfunding, and now I can get rich from my own skill, from my own art, where in the past I couldn't. But on the other hand, that trust that I was putting my money in is no longer reliable. It's no longer yielding. Other things that can happen with the eight in the 8 second, um, certain sort of intimacy. If you are married, then the certain sort of intimacy where you were um, penetrating each other's psyche or drawing from each other's energy, you might rethink the way you're being intimate into more Taurian. I think about the series of Sphere and Sun where she had the Venus Delight or Venus Ariel, where Venus was in Pisces, and the Venus in Taurus, where Venus is more about self pleasure, but also about, yeah, it's also about, if you think about sleeping with Venus in Taurus, it would mean um, giving pleasure to one another. If you think about sleeping with Venus and Scorpio, it would mean penetrating each other's psyche to get to know, to have control, to have to be sure, to get to know who is that person. I'm going to sleep with them and see what their kinks are. Then I'm going to know them. Then this can be the type of intimacy you have in the eighth house, because you evolve, if it's a natural thing, you evolve from being married to get to know deep the psyche and the kinks and the inner stuff that come up, and maybe the traumas and the wounds, everything hidden. But then you go in favor of wait. When we are going to have intimacy, we are also going to give each other pleasure. Um, and I think actually about, because Uranus is also astrology, it can also be talismanic. This might also be a good time, not necessarily not during an eclipse. I'm not advising you to make any rituals during an eclipse, absolutely not. But this might be where you might think, or you might bring in the sort of intimacy, or maybe you're learning to do intimacy with Venus in Taurus. And so Venus in Taurus talisman, not bought around the eclipse, might be useful for the way that you even please yourself, because you're going to learn pleasure and the value of self love, self pleasure, sensuality, a new skill of self love where it's not about penetrating the psyche of another and controlling them so that they will not go, and eventually that makes them leave, but actually about the give, because you give from a place of knowing what you want, knowing what you like, relaxing into intimacy, and that can improve whatever you were doing. If you have to let go of certain coping mechanisms, certain types of sex and kinks that you were doing to control the other person, consciously or unconsciously, to make sure that they wouldn't leave because you pleased them in so and so way. Now it's more going to be about your type of sensual pleasure, if it is that type of an eighth house relationship. Some people denote eighth house with therapy. In the case that it is Scorpio rule, this can be true, and so it can be that you're letting go of your therapist because you learned how to heal yourself, or you develop a new practice of maintaining or sustaining yourself emotionally, depending on the rulers. If they have, let's say the ruler of the 12th in the second, then you are going to have to sustain yourself mentally, emotionally, and then you're letting go of your relationship maybe with your therapist, or maybe your therapist leaves and now you have to let go of them and you have to self-sustain. Taurus. Okay, this is going to be, a second eclipse to do with your ascendant within a very small range of time. And so the solar eclipse was disruptive to your seventh house, to your relationships, or the lack of. Okay, maybe you got a new relationship during the eclipse. This can also be, you know. Um, and the lunar one is about you. But there is a certain aspect of you that is related to your relationships with others that you're given up. It can be that you have given up on a certain relationship, or certain relationship ended, or maybe certain relationship is ending now, but that person takes away a part of you. Preferably it was a part of you that you were, and this probably is the case, that that part of you was a part of you that you were acting out for survivalistic reasons. And so you're being forced into a transformation and almost being stripped of certain parts of your identity. You're no longer. I'm thinking about, with Uranus there, it can be a person that was, let's say, a woman that was married to a man, and then she finds out that she likes also women. And but in this case, it can be that her partner sees that she's just not. There's just something that's missing to her that he cannot answer, and he leaves. And that thing is a woman. Okay, let's say she's lesbian. She's not, pansexual or something like that. And now she's been stripped off that part of her where she was, his man's girl, and and that part of her identity is being stripped off of her, and now she has to adopt this new identity. But it doesn't feel, it doesn't feel, the liberation feels like being stripped off of something rather than um, being, liberated. But there can be an inner part that was acting towards that. um, so something, or it can be a working relationship. Maybe you had a working relationship with someone and you've compromised something, that you will no longer be able to compromise that, but you will be stripped of that commitment. Maybe you're fired, okay, by that, maybe that business partnership is coming to an end, and you're being stripped off of that, but internally you know that it was never true to you. It was something you did to survive, and now it's no longer. No, now you need to be on the thriving mode. You need to do you. Especially you need to do you. And it's radical, and you've had, Uranus playing in your first house for a while. It's like, okay, now it's time. Now it's time. You're being stripped of that old identity, that old part of your life path where it was allowed for you to do something for the sake of survival for a little while, but now it is no longer allowed. You need to give that up. It's not going to feel right. And the Saturn is there making sure that where you're heading, you're not losing what you're not supposed to be losing, but it's also making sure that you're losing what you're not supposed to keep with you. Those coping mechanisms, those partnerships that no longer apply, that were good for survival, but when you are thriving, it's no longer something that is supportive of your path. That Saturn is going to ensure that you're stripping them off. You're being stripped off of these partnerships that no longer serve you. And because the ruler of your second is up there with them, it may be people that you owed your skills to. It may be people that you were spending money on. It may be people that you made money from. Okay, partnerships you made money from, being stripped away. No longer will you be able to make a collaboration with these people because they're not true to you anymore. It was good for survival, not good to you anymore, and it will not be. Okay, the new will be more radically you, radically you. So everything with radical acceptance is benefic for you. The things that help you to radically accept yourself are going to be different. I'm thinking about, with people who had, let's say, because we are dealing with a very psychological deep, people who had, let's say, trauma. And before there was CPTSD, complex post-traumatic, blah, 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 they were like, you're a borderline. And so you said, okay, you identified yourself as borderline and you radically accepted yourself, so you changed your behavior. And now everybody knows what CPTSD is. So it's like, oh, you were never borderline. And let's say you cannot be with that borderline definition anymore. It's no longer fitting. It's no longer serving. So you have to find new ways to radically accept yourself. Now you are not a borderline person. You are a person who is recovering from CPTSD, or maybe you have recovered from CPTSD, who can no longer enjoy that coping mechanism of I am an ailment and I'm in recovery, and that sort of money or support that you are getting in the right of that, or the skills that you are developing in the right of that, you will need to let go of them. Maybe you were using certain ways to manage your disease, and then you realize that you are not a disease, so you need to let go of how you were dealing with that. Um, so that can be one case of that. Um, and another thing can be that you're showing yourself in a more technological way. Your life path is maybe to be a figure that people consume technologically. And so maybe you were depending on the rulers. Maybe have something with the 11th, and you are a public figure, and now there was only Zoom meetings. So now people are going to have to see you through Zoom. There's a new you emerging, so you have to let go of the old you. Okay, I can think they were standing. Had a lecturer that was standing in front of for 400 people, and if somebody was messing with their phone, they were stop and look at them, and that's how they controlled 300 people, and they had this huge charisma, but they were also perpetrators. And then came COVID, and then all they have was Zoom. So they would need somebody to help them with their Zoom or whatnot, and then all you see is a person, however lightning you get to have a good picture or to be photogenic. This is all you have. You cannot control the class anymore anyway. But maybe new sites emerge. You see closer. Think about going from the big screen to television or to the phone screen. So now the facial expressions, let's say you're an actor. Acting abilities are not these grand gestures of theater, but it can be something as small as the way you look at the camera, me speaking and you seeing here me in this tiny circle, not even able to see my eyes, and I'm looking at that. So I'm not very charismatic now. Um, but the tonality can change, and you can speak to a person the way you would look at the screen, and a fracture of facial muscles that move can create a big impact or a bigger impact. But what if it's a Zoom meeting and nobody's looking at you because they're looking at themselves and making sure that they're okay and that this or that, or maybe turning their screen off and they're playing with their doggy now? What do you do then? You need new ways. So maybe you have good humor, and then now your new humor, Mercury humor, it changes. But if you had an outdated humor, you had a sexist joke, now people cannot pay attention to something else. They don't have your charisma, they don't have your gestures, they don't have your kindness. All they have is a sexist jokes, and this is what they see. So this is outdated. You will need to let go. But maybe now you adopt a new humor, because humor is you. Okay, it's the second house. It's a skill that you have to be humorous, to be funny. And if you let go of that outdated humor, you might be charismatic in a whole new way. And now people are going to know you in a different way. But this is a seventh house, okay? This is how you communicate with another. So this would be your spouse, this would be your boss. And maybe the change of technology, maybe you're dating, and the change of technology is going to force you to showcase yourself in a new way, in a modern way, in an updated way with a new skill. Gemini. So for Gemini, this is happening in your Gemini ascendant, Sun and Moon. It's a Gemini ascendant mainly. This happened in your 12th and 6th house. So your 12th is the new, which is very interesting. And your 6th is something you let go of. You could be ridding yourself from an ailment. Or it can be, because 6th house is also our pets, it can be a pet, okay? So yes, it can be a pet that dies. It can be. Or someone you had to caretake, or someone that was something that was beginning to drain you emotionally. Maybe that can happen. Preferably not, but this is something that is possible with this one. Or alternatively, maybe you're actually finding a way to heal yourself or getting rid of an ailment by adopting a pet. Maybe you had like an emotional, physical, emotional thing, you know, again, like CPTSD or something, or, well, people with chronic pain are less, although I do know people with chronic pain who are caregivers of pets, and maybe that's helpful. And so maybe a new pet comes into your life, and that is actually beneficial for your mental health. Alternatively, you're grieving because you lost a pet, but with it, maybe that caregiving was draining you, and maybe those figures that you were being, you know, caretaking, when you grieve their death, but you're also being released from a certain burden that was already draining you, to be that caregiver. You could be letting go of a job or being fired for a job, but that job was draining you mentally. Maybe you were working very hard and you were being of service and you were a good employee, but then something happens and you're being fired. And it's very difficult for you to let go, but you know what? You kind of like that retreat. So you say, you know what? I'm going to take whatever money compensation that I get. I'm going to have me a retreat somewhere in the, you know, somewhere on land, and some, well, it's not going to be so quiet with Uranus, um, but I'm going to do something for myself, in isolation. Worst case scenario, it could be, you know, you're being hospitalized, but this hospitalization is actually beneficial for you. It's actually healing for you. Maybe you're going from this hospital um, to a whole new workplace that is actually more updated, or you're taking a time off from work and you retire. Maybe you even retire, you know? Maybe you even retire at this time. And it doesn't feel right at first, but it revolutionized your life in a way that you need. Okay? In the big picture, is something that's very beneficial. It's going to be more easy to see that as of March, when Mars is going to be leaving Gemini and entering Cancer. Other things this can be, yes, it can be that there is a certain sort of ailment, but the way to deal with this ailment is not necessarily, let's say it's an ailment in the physical, but the way to deal with this ailment is to revolutionize, and something that's manifesting. You're revolutionizing your perhaps unconscious beliefs, what you didn't know that you didn't know, the way you cope with your mental stress. There are a lot of applications to do with coping with psychological stress. A lot of psychology based applications, or perhaps you have, you know, some psychology based application is helping you deal with that, and then you're getting rid of an ailment that was also in your body. And with Taurus, it can be something to do with the throat. It can be something to do with the voice. Um, Something to do, you know, Mercury in the eclipse, maybe something to do with the hearing, or frequency based, or music based, or arts based, type of healing, or maybe application, or maybe a course that you take that has this effect in you. You weren't even expecting Uranus, something, a solution you weren't even expecting, is coming about. Anything more? Yeah, it does mean that, let's say, if you are in a place of isolation where there's hospitalization or even, you know, jailing, it is something that, you know, for example, there was a case. I had a colleague that in Israel, an army is mandatory, and she didn't want to serve in the army, but she didn't lie. She didn't want to lie about it, and she was taken to jail, the army jail. But she said, I felt so at ease in jail. I said, oh my gosh, why don't you give me more time? It's finally I had my own peace. I don't know what was the bigger story, but it can be with this aspect that, you know, a person is in jail and now they don't have to be the caregiver, they don't have to go to work, and maybe they have, you know, friends there, and they're they're actually, so, or somebody puts somebody in isolation and they think, oh my gosh, they're going to die there, but it actually, that, you know, it doesn't feel right at first place, but then they have a revolutionary aspect, you know, they feel mentally amazing in this, you know, jail place, and it's like they find a sense of freedom there. And whoever puts them there is like breaking their head thinking, oh gosh, I thought I'm going to give them troubles, but no, they're not the least bit of unhappy eventually about the circumstances. Yeah, not probably you're not going to jail, but um, or you went, you got fired, or you something forced you to take a vacation from work, and then you find liberation in that place that you didn't know that it was possible. Um, mm, mm, mm. But then it does include sadness. It does include letting go of some old concept of freedom as well. Okay, old concept of freedom of expression, old concept of freedom of for women, some old concept of freedom you need to let go of, and you find new freedom in that place that would feel like jail to you. You could even be a parent when I think about it. If you have something with the fifth, with the fifth house, um, 1, 2, 3, 4. Wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, the 50. Yes, yes. Venus is also the ruler. You could actually become a parent, and you say, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. This is this. This is that." But you find new freedom um, with your child. Just beware not to make your child your sibling with that aspect. But yeah, that can also be like you thought. Oh, being a parent is going to be so jailing, so this, so that, and then you're like, oh, but I actually feel free. I didn't know that I could feel this way. Um, but then there's also the loss of freedom, or maybe loss of something with the partner. No, loss of freedom, loss not the partner, but more like a job. Maybe you need to go part-time job, and you're like, oh my gosh, this feels like jail being at home with my children. And then they do something crazy or something funny, and you're like, oh, this is better than work. Um, Ascendant Cancer. So Cancer, this is happening in your 11th and 5th, but the 5th is what you let go of in favor of something of the 11th. But then that something of the 11th is the ruler is in the 5th. Again, we have for all signs, we have this the ruler of the new is the old. The old is the new, and the new is the old. Um, so this could be something that was both your hobby and your life mission, or a goal, or a hobby that you went to conferences for, and now something is changing. Maybe the conferences become digital. We recently had in the Kazimi, the Venus Kazimi in Libra, we had the KazimiCon in the astrology community on Twitter. And now we had a conference on Twitter where you could only listen to people talking. And that was the conference. So maybe you used to like going to a conference, and you used to like meeting the people in person, and so on and so forth. That was like a hobby for you. But now it's happening in the digital world. It's more accessible to more people, but you don't actually get to, chit chat, drink, and do funny stuff with the people in person. That can be something that happens. Um, but then with the new, it's that new way, that new digitized technological, or that even new view of astrology, is however it is done, and whatever it is that you have to give up, it's not coming back. Okay, it's not coming back. Usually because the benefits outweigh the benefits of that not coming back outweigh the sense of sorrow that you feel about this. And so, and it also can be a time where something you were doing as a hobby becomes a profession, and now you have to go to conferences, and you have to make a presentation, and now you're getting paid for that, because 11 is also how we make money from the crowd. Now you're a business. Maybe you were a podcast. Okay, maybe Spirit of Matter is going to get monetized, and now I'll have to make sure that I'm doing my SEO right. And I'm like, damn, I don't want to do this, but I do want to get, the publicity, and to get a sense of meaning and purpose. And now it's no longer going to be a hobby, but for you it has to be, I'm not Cancer ascendant, but this is something like that. Maybe you did a podcast that was something fun and something joyous, and now boom, it gets 20 million views, and now you're monetized, and it's selling to Netflix, and now you're on a job. doing that. So there's a certain part of the fun that you will need to let go of. Specifically for you, it's a certain part of the fun that you need to let go of. What you did for fun, you need to let go of. You might be doing it for profession now. Okay? Or alternatively, something you did for, in the 11th is going to become a hobby now. But because the new is the 11th, my expectation is that there's no activity in the 11th, new colleagues, new ways, if it's crowdfunding or making money that is based on making money from a lot of people or big performance or being a public figure. There is a new digitized way that you're doing that. Okay, if you're an artist, if you're a musician, you might have a concert on Zoom, or alternatively, you might be able to own your own record company, and that becomes more accessible to you because of digitized, monetary systems or whatnot. And so it is no longer something you do as a hobby. Okay, and that is a dream come true. But now the is come true, but there is a certain aspect of the leisure that you're gonna have to give up. Um, it might also mean that your relationship with your children goes through a certain transformation because you're maybe traveling for not necessarily traveling because you're a public figure now. Then certain ways or certain fun things you did with your children are you're no longer going to be able to do. So let's say if you were, with Scorpio, it can be something extreme, or maybe you were doing something extreme. Maybe you're going to the Luna Park with your children. You took, these trains that are like, those thrilling trains, and now you're going to need to have security to go to do the same thing with your children, because you won't be able to stand in line like the other people because you're a public figure now, and those fun things that you did with your children are no longer available to you. You're going to need to hire people, you're going to need to have security, and you're going to need to hire the place for yourself so that you can do it safely. And that is very much a possibility. Again, with Uranus in the North Node and the Moon in the 11, it's a sudden boom in your visibility, in your being public. If you're making money, you could have like a dead end project that you've been trying to crowdfund, and something happens, and and boom, you get all the money that you needed, that you thought, okay, I'm going to give it up. No, what you need to give up now is those things you do for fun. Another is risk taking. Maybe the way that you were taking risks, you would need to give it up now. Maybe you were doing more speculative investment, and now you have this crowdfunding, so you're no longer doing this speculative investment. But that was something that you did that was an extreme form of extreme play for you. But now, let's say you know what, you could be a person who's public figure on Bitcoin, because or digital coins, and maybe your company was experimental, and it went from that phase of being experimental, touching the edge, to that place where it booms and it succeeds, and now you cannot be speculative anymore, because now you have a lot of people who invest in your company, and you can't be as speculative. They can't lose money the way they did. You're going to have to let go of your business strategy, of your investment strategy, because right now you're no longer the alternative digital coin. You are the new normal. So that's something that can happen. I wanted to say sixth house because my sixth house. Leos. So Leos and Cancers, every eclipse touches. With Cancer, the lunar, of course, is the biggie, but both of them, because the eclipses involve the sun and the moon in a big way. And so the signs ruled by the sun and the moon are involved in a big way. They're in any eclipse. So even if the eclipse is not, on your first house, then you are more directly affected. And so by any new moon, full moon is something that speaks to you a lot, that affects you a lot, whether you're aware or not. Um, but the ruler of your ascendant is at the Ketu here. The ruler of your ascendant is at the side that we let go of. We might lose some Leo figures, some rulers, some kings, some queens can be suddenly lost, maybe due to old age, with the with the Saturn rulership. So this is something worst case scenario, person may die. Um, but for you, it means again that there is something in your personality that you're letting go of. If for cancers, it's something in your personality is becoming new. You become a public figure. It's becoming new. And you're going to have to adapt to that. With Leo, you're no longer something. And what is the new? It's the lunar phase. So you're gonna need to embrace those aspects of you. And funnily enough, those lunar things are happening in your 10th house. So your absence, or alternatively the absence of those royal parts of you, is going to be very visible. Okay? Saturn in the opposite sign has not been making it too easy for you. It's going to get better. But now, your royalty is being stripped off. The king is naked. If you're a queen, yeah? The king is naked even if you are a queen. It's not something bad. It can be a burden that you've been carrying. Maybe that crown, you know, there's the line where it goes, the crown dug into my skin. Maybe that crown dug into your skin, and now you're being stripped off that crown. And it doesn't feel so nice because you're being public street. It's very public, it's your image. And maybe your boss does that, or maybe this happens to your boss, but because the ascendant is Leo, this happens to you. You are the boss. You are that royalty aspect of your very persona is being stripped off, and what you're left with is yin, a very revolutionary yin, a very it's like imagine you did an interview with the queen of I don't know, the Queen of England when she was alive, and then something in that interview, she would take off the crown and she would start making jokes about her, corgi, and there was this aspect where, or she would expose her big attraction to I don't know who, and suddenly you would see this radically weird, very cute girl. But the crown is taken off, and what you're left with is that very cute girl who has her own game. She says whatever she wants, and you're like, you fall in love with her. You didn't look at her that way before. So that's stripping off that royalty part of you. That part where people used to fall in love when they fell in love with your image rather than with you has been taken away. Or this can happen to your boss, or this can happen to your career, or but what you're being like, you're feeling naked, but you're beautiful when you're naked. Okay, you're feeling naked, but it's much more in alignment with what your image. It's very funny to say your image should be. It's much more in alignment with what is true to you. Much more in alignment with what is true to you than the previous thing. But the previous thing, it was a certain sort of elegance and eloquence that you had in the eyes of the others. Maybe somebody was writing your speeches and that someone dies or that someone no longer works with you. And now you're going to have to write your own speeches. And maybe you had a speech impairment that nobody heard of because you never spoke, and now you're forced into an interview. Okay, maybe you were a model or somebody, a performer or whatnot. Um, and so that could happen. You could be also a public figure, or you could have been a person to whom in your career you would speak in front of people, you're being vocal, but now with the digitized everything, now you have to, you're being interviewed through a screen, and this is what you can offer to the world. Or your career becomes digitized, or suddenly maybe you were a person who was, performer or an actor, and now you decided to say, well, you know what, I like astrology and I'm an astrologer. Or you exposed the side of you that likes astrology, and everybody had this image of you that is completely different. Um, or maybe you had an image of a person who is a survivor and whatnot, and then uh, you're seen in a place where you like luxuries, or you've been photographed in this place, or something to do with the technology, that exposes you, that strips you of the image that you've had. But you know what, people even like it more. People like your radical feminine even more. Maybe you become exposed as a radical feminist, and people thought you were this old-fashioned person, or old-fashioned man, or old-fashioned woman, and then they strip out, some arguments, some discussion happens, something, and the way you express yourself, suddenly, you suddenly are forced to say something that takes you off that royal ancient um, person image that you had. And you know what, the new is even better, but you feel naked, you feel exposed, you feel, contract, you feel anxious with Saturn, you feel anxious about this new you that is being presented to the world, even though you probably will be well received. um, yeah. And of course, this can happen to your father, this can happen to your boss. It doesn't necessarily, but because it's the 10th house, or it's something that your father or your boss is involved with. But because it's ascendant, this means you are affected. Ascendant Virgo. So for you, this happens in the third and ninth house, but the ninth is the new. So it can be something as simple as, the way you went about your daily routines are no longer valid, or some siblings, you won't see them so much because maybe you had, maybe your big sister convinced you to go and have a degree in gender studies, and you said, you know what, I'm going to take that, and you got accepted to universities. You're going to go to have a degree in gender studies or a degree in finances, but you're not going to be able to see your sister all that often. And it's not coming back, because by the time you're going to finish your degree, you both will be, I don't know, in new relationships or different communities, um, or whatnot. And so that's something, that way of the old is no longer coming back. The way that you communicated, how often you used to communicate, is not coming back in favor of something new. Your worldview can be suddenly transformed, suddenly changed. It's like that final eureka in a certain process that's been ongoing. Okay. You might get a degree, and then you get a degree, and instead of getting a certificate, you will get a degree by, online, the scannable, and so your degree is digitized. Or you take on astrology studies. This can also be. Um, you might travel suddenly because you want your freedom, or your freedom, following your freedom takes you somewhere, that you might, travel or establish a sort of residence in, or you think you're going to just a vacation somewhere, then you establish residence because of Saturn. You establish residence in that new place. Um, and so what, you change your siblings. You're no longer going to be with the same neighbors in the same neighborhood, or with the same old car or whatnot. So it can be also in that direction. And again, whatever served you day-to-day life, the practices that served you for survival are no longer valid, because you're taking on a new religion, right? A new worldview, a new practice. Maybe you travel. Um, Maybe you study digitally, or maybe you try or study for with a university or an organization that is teaching from overseas through digital means, and that can be the case for you. And so by merit of that, you're no longer doing your third, because right now you're doing studies or you're in front of your computer, and what you used to do, um, in the third house is not so, or maybe because it's Scorpio, you used to go to extreme on a daily basis, but now you have to settle down, and it's like you have to settle down and rebel with this aspect because of Uranus. You settle down and rebel. Uranus is in Taurus. You settle down and rebel, and that's lovely. A lot of people have been speaking about land, um, but this is a place of studies, unless yeah, yeah, this is more like a place of studies for you. Um, but it can be that that studies become work. You might become a TA. You might travel, and then you think that this is a vacation. You're just going to look for yourself, and then you find yourself in a new job in a new place, and you settle down. You settle down and rebel. So that's the kind of effect that has. But the ruler of your ascendant is a part of something that you let go of, because Mercury again is with Keto. Maybe you were known as that troublemaker outside. Maybe you were a teenager and you were known as that person who burns the ashtrays, or the burns the trash and whatnot, and you were the stunt person, and now you go to university or you study or something, or there's a new project that recruits you to study in this university online, and now you're doing that all day, and maybe you're a programmer or whatnot, and now it's like you're no longer that kid. You're that part of your personality, the way that you communicated, the way that you projected yourself in the world in your daily life, is no longer that. You're going to have to, sadly, you won't be able to do these stunts anymore on a daily basis. You will do them internationally. So that can be the case for you. But it is something that's major. You're letting go of something very, very big. And for this reason, yes, we might also see mercurial figures die, okay? Some writers, some bloggers, some um, frequency-based healers, people who the pen, or even doctors might pass away, so that the new comes. Or in terms of medicine, we might see the new technologies of diagnosing patients instead of doctors there. So it's a part of the industrial revolution. Doesn't mean that you'll die, okay? Um, so that can be. Ascendant Libra, second and eighth houses. Now, your ruler again is with the eclipse, is with what we are letting go of in this eclipse. Your ruler, and again, yes, it's true, we might see Libra people being eclipsed, judges or people of the beauty industry, cosmetic industry, or whatnot. Or maybe rules and regulations on a mundane level that were related to beauty or aesthetics are no longer valid. That's something that can happen. What can we do when we have a stellium with Keto? Then there's a lot of people that we'll be letting go of. Um, but on a personal level, the way you were doing you, especially the feminine side of you, especially the side of you that's related to what you were, it's not what you were known for, but what you knew yourself as, is no longer. Again, it could be that you were creating art to balance to balance your emotional state, or psychological state or bank account. You're doing this what you needed to survive. You could be like a painter that was doing the artistic work to and aiming it to the image that people wanted to see so that they can make money, survivalistic, and now you have artistic freedom. And so now you have a new source of joint resources. You no longer have to do something for survival. But it can also be that you have to have your art digitized because maybe you were a great painter, oil painter, and people look for NFTs now, or people look for digitized art, and people like, but I have an oil painting. Or maybe you cannot keep that oil painting, and something like you would need to let go to your old way of an old skill that is related to expressing your voice, to judgment, to finances. Maybe you were an accountant and now there's an application replacing accountants, and you will need to change the way you make money. You need to change the way you make money from your skill. You need to change what money you spend on. You need to change all of this. But remember, the second house for you is survivalistic. Okay? Maybe you're viewing yourself or your self value as someone who can survive everything. And now you have a crisis, but you know what? You find out that you're not that strong. But oh my gosh, do you receive help from people? And maybe that's your lesson, that you can be helped. You can rely on other people more than you thought. For you, your lesson might be actually to be less self-sustainable. Okay, maybe you had the skill of being able to control everybody through knowing their deep psychology or whatever skill that you were doing to make money from, and you saw it as a part of yourself and that was necessary for your survival. And now you find out that you can no longer rely on that. But guess what? You receive sudden wealth coming from your eighth house. Maybe you find out that for some reason, maybe your business isn't selling, but then you find out that your husband is more capable of making money that you knew, or your wife is more capable of making money that you knew she could, and you get money from that, and you realize that maybe you've been working hard all these years and now it's your time to relax a bit. And it's not necessarily coming up as an ailment, but more like, maybe your business is not working. Maybe you can't sell, your skill or your art or whatnot because there is an adaptation process, and you find out that your partner is a source of energy. Maybe they help you with technology or with acquiring new technology. Maybe they have a technology for you, okay, that you can absolutely rely on. And now you can rely on their partnership in a way that you didn't know that you're able to. So it's bad news that hide a gift for you. You're the only ascendant in the house who is about to learn the opposite lesson of the other ascendants, because all other ascendants are learning to be more self-sufficient while you are learning to be leaning on others a bit. So this is a very difficult thing for you because you used to think of yourself as, I think about Margaret Thatcher needing welfare. you know? But not needing welfare because she's sick, but because she's just not selling. But then finding out that even when you're not a top performer, you're still worthy in society. So it's a sense of worth that's independent. It's like unconditional love that you suddenly experience. It's going to feel like a tremendous crisis. Because again, it's something that's a part of your identity, is what you're able to do. Mars, doing. And you're not able to do that. Or now that skill is not in demand. It's a crisis, identity crisis. But guess what? You're still loved. You're still desired. And now people in your life have a chance to show that they're useful to you, that they're meaningful to you, that they can provide, that they can suddenly be more reliable in unexpected ways that you have imagined. So that is somebody new takes the role of that eighth house person in your life. And it's something that you didn't see coming, something that you didn't consider, and it's something that you don't like. but is actually necessary for your life path. And not because it makes you more humble, in as much as it makes you more aware that you are loved also by society. That you don't have to be the person who's always doing something to balance something in order for the room to like you. You can be the worst image to you of your life and realize that you're still loved. So it's a big gift for you. It's not going to feel like a gift, but it is a big gift. And then that old thing is not coming back. Okay? That new thing, that new sudden change, it's where it's heading. So you're not going to be as sustainable. Doesn't mean you're not going to be successful. It's just not going to be as sustainable. It can be that, your business actually grows, and what you used to be able to do, you actually have to take on a certain business partner, or, maybe you need to take an accountant, and you didn't need to take accountant. You're like, I know to manage money. I know to manage money. I know to manage money. You get this big debt because you didn't pay attention to something, and you didn't see that in the program, but you had to feel now digitally is more difficult for you. Now you need to hire an accountant. But you know what? With this accountant, you make even more money. And you see the joy of being able to trust another professional to do their business. Okay, don't have to be in control all the time. Ascendant Scorpio. So, for you, Scorpios, it's not only that it is happening in your first house, it is that you need to let go of you. But this is something that you're kind of used to, because with Scorpio, there's a lot of letting go, death, and transformation kind of thing. So, of course, yes, this can be genuine death. Yes, people can die that are Scorpio. Um, but most likely you're not gonna die. This may not come as a happy news to you. Most likely you're gonna make it. And most likely you're going to have to be either um, you're going to have to be able to develop partnership, but do not worry, this will manifest. You will be able. But this is very, very, very beautiful, because Scorpio is a survivalistic. Your being solo was survivalistic. Okay? And you no longer are able to rely on acting from survival. My darling, you may fall in love and find out that that relationship is actually more sustainable than you believe that to be. That Taurian figure in your life is actually more reliable than you ever imagined. Alternatively, your wealth can increase, as a result of which you're no longer doing relationships to sustain you, and so the relationship is sustainable now. Because your independence, your financial independence, and your expenditure can be something that now you do in a way that actually manifests freedom. You might spend more money, but that money is genuinely going to grant you freedom. It's not just going to be, spend more money on the lawyer that's going to bail you out of all the troubles that you did trying to control your spouse, for example, or your business partner. Now it's going to be that, okay, what do I need to spend money on that might increase my expenses, but genuinely contributes to my sense of freedom and liberation that I do need to have it in a relationship, so that when I enter a relationship, I'm not trying to control my partner to a fault. And that certain Taurian figures that require more space, business partners, spouses, anything, one-to-one relationship that is equal, that you consider that person flaky, that you consider that person, they're perfectly timed, is just in a chaotic dynamic pattern that seemed intelligible to you. They thought they were supposed to be fixed, but they're not doing it fixed. And they're like, oh, now the time is good to do, I don't know, talismans. Now the time is good to do this business. Now the time is good to do that business. And you're like, oh my gosh, they're not flaky, they're actually timely. And now that you've spent your money on being more liberated, you can let go a bit of your control. And you're like, okay, that a sustainable relationship. It can be with the woman, with the more lunar person, maybe with an astrologer, uh, something, but there's something about your very you. You will need to give you up for the relationship to be sustainable. And usually this is something that is destructive, but this time it's somehow constructive. The old you that's outdated is going to be completely transformed suddenly. And guess what? It's going to be actually liberating. But it's not like Libra that you need to rely on others and be less self-sustainable. You're actually going to be more self-sustainable by increasing your expenses on the right things for you. And those right things can be something as simple as art, be simple as maybe a vacation. Okay, maybe you go out on a vacation, and I don't know, maybe you buy a yacht. Okay, and now you're a more peaceful person to be around and less controlling. Because whenever you feel bad, you just, take a stroll, maybe you take your jet plane and you just fly. And now that you have that and you wasted that money, you thought, oh, it's expensive. It's only, a really Scorpio thingy. Only those pedos buy those yachts and then you find out that you have this jet plane and you have this yacht. It's a huge luxurious expense, but it grants you freedom because instead of being an intolerable person in your one-to-one relationship, you can say, hold on a second, I need to take a ride. And you travel somewhere and you go back and you're a new person, and now you can give space because you take space to you. It costs money, but it's not money that you don't have. Okay, and now that relationship becomes fruitful. Now that business relationships receives the space it needs to bring you the wealth that you're seeking, to bring you the pleasure that you're seeking in relationships, to give you the safety and sense of security. Suddenly you're able to trust someone you didn't believe you can trust, because you said, oh, they were constantly lying to me, they were constantly hiding things from me. But now it's like you give them the space to show up with their truth, and now you can accept their truth because you invest in your freedom. But you're gonna have to give you up. The old you is gone. It's manifesting, it's gonna happen. Okay, something just happens. The old you is gone. Those hidden subversive tactic and communications, gone. Now you spend money on something that gives you freedom outside of having a partner, so that when you come to the relationship, it takes the proportion that it needs to take. And now you can actually, guess what? With this Uranus Taurus, you could actually be getting married. You could actually be getting, a business engaged, or being offered engagement. Believe it or not. Alternatively, yes, of course, Uranus can mean divorce. But again, it can mean divorce. It can mean a separation that is coming. Naturally, with this Venus placement, there's a separation coming. But listen to what I said earlier, and you'll understand where it's heading now. Because now you're going to be spending, maybe you were spending too much money on that person. Maybe you had a sugar baby that you need to give up. Okay? And you need to stop spending that money on that. Because you know it was not getting to you any place. You were investing in the relationship that was not what you needed to do to have that relationship, or to have the pleasures that you're seeking from that relationship, to control that partner, and waste so much energy and wealth on that, and mental effort, the 12th there, that now you're being stripped of it, and you feel like you're being stripped of the old you. But oh, what a relief. Oh, what a relief. So this separation is actually, it could be in the form of the separation, that you're being stripped off. It's like everything that they taught you about how to get the girl and do the communication and do this and all the things that were taking you out of you, your natural love for intimacy, for a deep sense of connection, and now you're communicating like a snake. Then the other person is going away from you and is no longer, want your sugar, and now you're being stripped off of that. So but the good news is that all the ways that they told you how to get the business partner, how to get the woman, how to get the man, were wrong to the actual relationship that you're seeking, because you'll be more authentically you in the new relationship. So it could be a divorce that will lead to your changing of expenditure habits and to your actually being happy in a relationship. You might even start to actually show who you genuinely are, but not because you want to, but because you were stripped off of what you're not, and then someone new falls in love with you. Because the Venus is coming to your house. It can be maybe a divorce and then a beginning of a new relationship suddenly, which is unlike you. Okay, it's unlike you not to take the time and to really consider in depth what you were going through and so on and so. And it's unlike you to believe that it's not necessary and it's not needed, and the change can be sudden. Um, so that is something that can actually be. And if it was a business partnership, again, it's very likely maybe you have your own venture, and now if it was artistic partnership, your own venture, maybe you were in a band and now you're being said goodbye to, and you're like, what you did to preserve this band was compromising you, and now it's been stripped off, and now you're having your own solo venture, and then you meet another partner or meet a spouse, or join another band, but when you all have solo projects, and you feel more liberated and more authentic there, and it's more successful. Ascendant is the last ascendant. It's Sagittarius. So this happens in your 12th and 6th, when the 6th is what is coming into fruition. Pets, the way you are of service to the world, your workplace, and your home environment. So you're reflecting upon your home environment, your family of origin, and there's a new job for you in the world. Literally a job, or you adopt a new pet. And you're letting go of a mental crisis. The way you've been doing your mental plane is it was not useful for you. And it's something that you didn't know you were affected by, and now you're like, this is gone. No longer will you be doing that. You could be a person, it could be that, for example, you had a mental diagnosis, and you were with this mental diagnosis, but it was not good for you. Now that you tend to your home environment and reflecting upon your home environment, and maybe altering and changing the way you think about your home and your state of origin, makes you physically healthy, and now you can get a job. Or maybe now you adopt a pet, and you're enjoying that job, and all those things that were related to that 12th house, those um, old jobs, old colleagues, old open enemies are gone. Old hidden enemies are gone. Okay, it could be also that you had, for example, let's say you were diagnosed as schizophrenic, and you were taking the pills, taking this, taking that, and then in addition to that, you were going to certain therapy, or maybe some new therapy like open dialogue therapy entered, and now they come to your house and they speak with you, and you see that, oh my gosh, it has been a while since I had a psychotic seizure. Okay, and maybe you adopt an animal, and now you're healthy. and you'll no longer need in that. But then you find out, maybe you learn a new practice, a new, with Neptune there, maybe you learn some new energy, maybe you learn to set energy boundaries or something. And now you're like, oh my gosh, I thought that this was psychosis. Now I see it was psychic attack, and I had hidden enemies that were actually real. Maybe from work, maybe, a partner. Maybe my partner was doing psychic stuff on me, and now that I have this way to combat, to banish the energy, to get grounded, but then, with Pisces not so grounded, but to banish the energy, um, to keep good energy in my house, to cleanse, to change my mindset, to cleanse to cleanse the way I think about my family of origin. Maybe you were isolated from your family of origin in some way, and now I see that there is an answer to these voices. There's a limit that that I can set there. There's a boundary that I can set there, and perhaps I'm not crazy. Okay, this is something that can absolutely happen into you. The way you were dealing with your mental and physical health is no longer valid. New things are coming along. It can also mean that, there's this new application, or maybe you use this new application to follow your moods relation to some physical problem that you have, and then you find out that, the pills you took for depression are no longer needed. It can be something as simple as that. Again, with the 12th and the 6th, yes, a pet can die, absolutely. Or somebody in your work or an enemy can die. That's something that can be, but also something new. Okay, some new people. Or it can be, some new open enemies as well. With the 6th house, yeah. So modernized enemies. Digital enemies. So that can be. The ascendants that are affected by Ketu, that is Leo, Taurus, Libra, Gemini, and Virgo, you might experience identity theft. Also Scorpio. This might happen, but it's something fated that's meant to bring a new identity there. It's not necessarily something that is going to be that destructive. So that was, another thing about the 6th and the 12th. Yeah, perhaps you were on a retreat and now you're returning to work, but it's a new job, things have changed. Unusual job, maybe it's something that used to not be digital and now is digitalized with technology or sciencey, or something that was not so sciencey and now is having some rules and regulations because it's becoming scientific or considered scientific. That can be the case, or art can be AI art, but for you it's getting a job. It's getting a job or getting a pet or getting an enemy. And that can also be the case with this placement. But Jupiter is showing you the bigger picture. That it's important to let go of the old, that the new is good for you, but not that the new is good for you, mainly that it's important to let go of the old. There's something that is expanding in your 4th house. Could be expanding your 4th house, maybe there's a new child in the family and now you need to get a job or something like that. But yeah, not necessarily so. Not necessarily your child or somebody else's child in the family or something like that. But maybe you find a new sense of freedom in the house that you didn't conceive that deeply, and now you see that letting go. Maybe your house becomes more hospitable with Neptune in the 4th house. Maybe your house becomes more hospitable and you don't need, the mental hospital or the hospital, or something is arranged, some accommodation is arranged that your house is more healthy for you. And with that, there comes, new responsibility. Maybe you have a pet in your house that you need to caretake, and that's a new sense of joy that feels a bit constraining at first, but is bringing about, your ability to cope with the new and be maybe more self-sufficient at home, or you need to be more self-sufficient in your workplace, um, and you can no longer rely on maybe you're giving up, a psychiatric image or psychiatric, not psychiatric image, but more like a psychiatric tag, and um, now you carry your responsibilities of work in a new way, and their technology helps in this position. Maybe there's an application that you can use to manage your inner state, and now you no longer need prescribed pills or to see a doctor, and now you can work, you can have a job, and so on and so forth. So yeah, um, all in all, it's not a terrible eclipse, and there's a lot of remedy, there's a lot of things to lean on. There's a lot of even clarity about why do we need to let go of certain things, even if it is your 12th. Why do we need to let go of certain things? Um, and But because again, the moon is opposite Venus, opposite Mercury, square in Saturn, especially square in Saturn, it feels constraining. It feels constraining, but it's like the contraction before the birth, during birth giving. Okay, the contraction during birth giving. It feels constraining, but it's the contraction of the birth giving of the new in that Taurus field in your life that will eventually affect also the past. It's the future that affects the past. So that's why it's so confusing emotionally and psychologically. And oh my gosh, this is a long video. So I'm Tali Shir on Twitter, Shilly Youngblood on Instagram, and I'll see you in my next video. I do readings, so you can contact me on Twitter or Instagram for that. Bye bye.